with Professor Surinder Jotka, Professor of Sociology at Jawaharlal Nehru University, Yashwant Deshmukh, well-known political analyst and psephologist and director of C-Voter, joining us from Dubai, and Rahul Verma, Senior Fellow at the Center for Policy Research right here in New Delhi. And today we're discussing the mother of all battles in Punjab. I know everybody's talking about Uttar Pradesh, where 59 seats across 16 districts have gone to the polls. Both Punjab, the mountainous, hilly border state of Uttarakhand, as well as parts of UP, have gone to the polls less than 24 hours ago. In UP, we've seen how Akhilesh Yadav, the Samajwadi Party leader, is giving his best, and all his family coming out in support of him, as well as large numbers of voters in UP. But today we're discussing Punjab and the battle in Punjab, 117 seats. And let me just give you some statistics first. The voter turnout has been, or seems to be, according to the latest Election Commission reports, quite low compared to the 2017 election last time around. The voter turnout was this time around 63.8% compared to 77.63% in 2017. And amongst the lowest turnouts was in Amritsar East, where Navjot Singh Sidhu of the Congress Party was in battle with Bikram Singh Majithia of the Akali Dal, the brother-in-law of Sukhbir Singh Badal. So Professor Jotka, I'd like to come to you first. Your comments on the battle in Punjab.
I think Punjab is continues to be difficult to predict because this is a kind of moment of churning for Punjab. There are obviously some new players in the field, and alliances have been disrupted and new alliances have come in. And I think most importantly, the farmers' movement, which kind of preceded elections, even though agriculture or farmers' movement did not become a kind of central issue in Punjab elections for some reasons, which again is a very interesting kind of subject to discuss. But I think Punjab would be hard to discuss, hard to predict. Vote percentage is also not as simple as it appears, because in some areas, vote polling has been very high in Malwa region, but in some other areas, polling has been very low. Rural areas, polling has been very high. Urban areas, polling has been very low. And there are new actors, for example, Sanyukt Samaj Morcha, the farmers' outfit. If they do well, that would have direct implications on AAP's performance. Congress also is not the same party with Dalit face. It might actually have a very, very different kind of constituency focus. And
right.
If that constituency gets mobilized, then again things might turn very different. Again, Jat voter, which has also been the traditional elite of Punjab, they are for the first time, in some sense, not leading the Congress party. Earlier Congress party, except for once when Gyani Zail Singh was the chief minister, It has always been led by big landed Malwa Jat.
Okay.
And others are still from Malwa region, and they are Jats and they are Sikhs. But this is kind of something very, very new and very interesting.
Sure.
Punjab is kind of going through a process of churning for itself as well.
Okay.
Agriculture has shrunk and it is not so dominant and so powerful, even though farmers' movement was very effective. As I said, it's an interesting subject to discuss.
Yeah, we'll talk. Yes, we'll talk about all these. Yeah, we'll talk about all these issues. Yashwant Deshmukh, I want to come to you and ask you about this fragmentation that Professor Jotka was talking about. Now, the traditional bipolar polity of Punjab, the old alliance between the Shiromani Akali Dal and the BJP that we saw fractured in the wake of the farm laws that were first passed in 2020. And now there are 4 or 5 big polls around which people have voted. Some are saying that the margins of possible victory could be very thin. Your first thoughts?
Well, it could mean many things for many people, the low turnout. Certainly, first of all, it's actually kind of disappointing because for the last 10 years, we have seen across India the turnouts actually going up. So probably Rahul can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think among the major states, this would be the first instance in the last 10 odd years when the turnout has dropped, if it is a drop, because we still know that Election Commission might come up with the update on the figures. Sometimes the numbers change, when they get the final figures of the entire turnout. But having said that, Jyoti, the low turnout, first of all, low or high turnout in many of the elections do not really fit in the conventional explanation of high turnout is anti-incumbent and or low turnout is not, or what, something like that. We have had very good exceptions of both the cases. But one thing I know, what I understand or what I have experienced in last 3 decades of my professional experience is that low turnout generally suits the parties which have a cadre vote, where they know they have a minimum threshold of people who will, come what may, go out and vote for their party.
Mm-hmm.
Low turnout is in general is not really good for the people who are expecting an out of the world exceptional result for them. So, so that is where it is now puzzling me if it is a low turnout, because in Punjab there are 3 different kind of what you can say cadre vote. There is only one party which is the main challenger right now with everybody, all the analysts and our polling numbers and everybody favoring is Aam Aadmi Party.
Right.
I don't think that Aam Aadmi Party can boast of being a cadre-based party at this point of time. It can certainly say something like that in Delhi, for example, where they have a minimum number of voters who would come out and vote for Aam Aadmi Party. Right now in Punjab, they cannot probably say that. In Punjab, the cadres are, number one would be the Hindu vote of the RSS and the BJP. There would be a minimum number of cadre which will come out and vote. So if the turnout is really low in urban areas, it might help them because I know that that how they work and how they. Second cadre vote is of Akalis. They have the minimum number of voters. Third is not a cadre vote, but I would say Dalit voters do have a very high relative turnout numbers across India. And right now they are associated with the Chinese chief ministership in some way or the other. And they were excited and enthusiastic about going out and voting for a Dalit chief minister. Right. The people who are not exactly very enthusiastic about Chennai were the Jat Sikh voters who were voting for Congress.
Right.
So while saying these things, this low turnout and the 3 cadres that I just counted in my tracker, I wasn't expecting them to do good. You are getting them. So it's contradictory. For me, it's something which is like coming out of the syllabus at this point of time, because whatever the number crunching that I have been doing for almost a year, this low turnout puts up a question mark on that. That, if the numbers were a drawing room sentiment, or if they are really the kind of number which actually went out and voted for Aam Aadmi Party and did something great over there. So that is something which will be a big question for me to judge and to check with the data.
Okay. Rahul, your comments on this low voter turnout and what do you think this means?
Okay, thank you, Jyoti. 2 points. One, I think this is a very, very important election for Punjab. It could be as critical, not as, but perhaps second most critical in elections after 1997, which restored normal political competition after decades of insurgency and political turmoil. And the reason why I'm saying that this is a very critical election is because social conflict, which was subsumed under 2-party system of Punjab, has been now broken. The pot has been stirred with, as Professor Jyotka pointed out, lots of issues, the farmers' issues, the scarlage issue, and then old allies breaking up, new alliances being formed, a Dalit being elevated to the post of chief minister. So it has basically upset the equations both at the elite level as well as the mass level. And so going forward, this will be a very important election. On the turnout, I completely agree with Yashwant ji on 2 things. One, actually, there is no relationship, like looking at the data of past 30, 40 years, there is no relationship between the level of turnout and whether the government is going to lose or win. And also, we know that in the case of lower turnout, cadre-based parties are better able to mobilize. I don't want to comment too much on the turnout factor because the revised figure in the night reached till 70. And last time, what it was 77. So once the postal ballot and other things are counted, if the difference is just 2-3 points, then it's routine fluctuations which happens across elections. But if the gap is 7, 8, 9 points, and second, what as Professor Jyotka pointed out, if there are regional variations and big regional variations, because one figure basically suggested that the turnout in Malwa region was around 73 and in Doaba Majha region was around 64, 65. So if there are big gaps, then as Yashwant pointed out, like polling numbers have to be considered or relooked while making forecasts.
Okay. Professor Jyotka, can I come to you and talk to you about the most important issues in front of the Punjab voter? You said earlier that, in a sense that the Congress party should have won Punjab, but we know what happened. Amrinder Singh left the party, formed his own Punjab Lok Congress in alliance with the BJP. Now, what were the most important issues in front of the voters? Do you think it was the Dalit vote? Do you think it was the farm laws? What in your view was most important?
See, that's again a very interesting kind of subject to discuss. I think Amrinder's leaving Congress would perhaps help Congress. If Congress comes back to power, one of the reasons it would come back to power because they change the government. Otherwise,
it would help the Congress party. Amrinder Singh leaving the Congress.
Yeah, it would help Congress party
in what way?
Electoral process, because the anti-incumbency which was there against Amrinder remained against Amrinder, so they didn't have to really answer to that. And then 6 months becomes kind of the main point, and that's where Dalit consolidation will happen. That's where some new constituency might kind of join the Congress. We don't really know. There's 31% OBC. Nobody talks about that. How are they behaving? Is there a kind of communitarian trend among those voters? Then there again, Hindu voter is again very, very complicated voter in Punjab. It's not tied only to RSS. Hindu voter in Punjab has always, in some sense, been very smart, and they can last minute, they might go with Congress. They also could go with AAP, apart from obviously BJP, which is kind of their obvious choice. They also have some relationship with Akalis. So it depends on if there is a strategic voter that we want BJP Akali to win. Wherever Akali candidates are strong, they might vote for Akalis. So Punjab situation is complicated. And I think I completely agree with Rahul. It's very critical elections. In terms of issues, again, we started with the questions of sacrilege and questions of drugs. They also remained at some level, but question of sacrilege became kind of marginal question, and question of corruption was projected to be I think this was also very well planned by media and by other opposition parties, because they wanted Channi to be defensive, because at one time when Prime Minister went and the way he confronted the issue, he had become the hero of Punjab. I mean, he would have easily won handsomely if these corruption issues had not come up. And though kind of they have also been in some sense not very clear, but that kind of media got a point to talk about.
Let me interrupt you there. You're saying that the corruption issue overshadowed the potential gains that Charanjit Channi, the incumbent chief minister, could have made, and he could have won the election on the caste vote?
At one level, he was the Punjab hero. People were kind of using his comments on Prime Minister visit as mobile, phone tones, right? So he had become hero at one time, but then media found because see, Dalit becoming a chief ministerial candidate threatens all kinds of people symbolically. Mm-hmm. So the establishment in Punjab did not want to accept Channi. He was fine as kind of stopgap arrangement. If Sidhu was to come back, then the Congress social base would have been with it. But Channi becoming a face of Congress party made lots of people uncomfortable, and Punjab is not willing to talk about caste. There was hardly any discussion about caste. So, but Dalits know about caste. I mean, people, and also the dominant castes. I think as Yashwant was talking about, Jat Sikh voters who were earlier Congress voters, they may go with AAP, they may go with even Akalis. We don't really know. So, caste is a very important factor in Punjab politics, and that was the reason why those issues, in some sense, went to the margin, and the question of corruption and all these things were foregrounded. And even though ED question was always questioned by every political party, AAP thought ED was doing a great job. So these are kind of very interesting kind of points where one needs to analyze how media establishment works in moments of this, when suddenly some Dalit face comes up, and he was an accidental chief minister to begin with, but then he also consolidated himself, and he turned out to be a very smart kind of leader who could raise issues, who could connect with people, who could actually confront big leaders like Modi and do it on his own terms, in his own language, and does it very effectively. So these are very important moments. That's why it becomes critical for Punjab. because Jat Sikh is not a very large number. Their numbers are less than 20%.
Right.
So they are not really demographically very large numbers. And Panthik doesn't become an issue here. This is again very, very important issue in Punjab. Panth question was always one of the main issues, Sikh identity question. This time nobody talked about Sikh identity. Even though Maan is contesting, but Maan is not going to get more than 2 or 3% votes. There's no kind of consolidation of question of Sikh identity or Panthik issues. So these are very, very important and interesting kind of questions that we need to talk about, and we'll perhaps keep waiting and decoding after the results come, and people will keep commenting on Punjab.
So Yashwant, this is, let's talk about the Charanjit Singh Channi issue. When I say issue, I don't mean, of course, the person himself, as Professor Jotka said, he turned out to be this very interesting accidental chief minister. But what does he represent? And the challenger that the Aam Aadmi Party became. What is it about the Aam Aadmi Party? They won only 20 seats last time around. And this time, if they are, some people say, some political observers say that they could be the face that challenges these the existing traditional parties. So let's talk about these two.
Well, Channi is definitely that elephant in the room who nobody wants to talk about. As Professor Saab just said, that in Punjab, nobody wants to talk about casteism. Nobody wants to talk about the Dalit, but as if it is not there.
But why not? Why not?
Yeah, but Dalits perfectly know that they are there. That's the funny side of it. Jyoti, I have a different take on it, and Rahul might laugh a bit on this one. Pure India mein baat karte samay, UP or Bihar get cursed like anything for caste-based politics. While in 30 years I figured out every bloody state does the same level of casteist politics which UP or Bihar does, but they don't get. हम जो है UP Bihar के भैये जो है वो बदनाम ज्यादा होते हैं उसमें. But anyways,
आप पंजाब में भी बदनाम है, इतना भी मैं बता दूं आपको जो
जी. So but having said that, Dalit, I think Dalit identity is and could be the game changer of Punjab election. And remember when we talked when Channi was made, and I said it is a master stroke. It was definitely a master stroke. Problem was that the way Congress diluted his candidature, the way it was as if in cricket analogy, सिद्धू साहब 5 गेंद टुक टुक करके खेलते थे और लास्ट बॉल पे जो है रन ले लेते थे कि चन्नी को बैटिंग ही नहीं करने देनी. I mean, the guy didn't get a chance to bat, at least in a way. And for 6 months, his prime opposition was Navjot Singh Sidhu, not Kejriwal, not Badal, nobody else. The poor chap was just fielding his stuff against Navjot Singh Sidhu. That was the problem. And as you mentioned, I will now bring in the question of Aam Aadmi Party. If there are significant regional variation, and if the turnout is 70% plus in Malwa, I see that as a pretty good sign for Aam Aadmi Party. Mm-hmm. Very good sign if they have a really high turnout in Malwa. But if they have a low turnout in Doaba and in Majha, then probably we are looking at some kind of resurgence for Akalis and some kind of resurgence for BJP and PLC combined, And yes, there were reportings, and you can confirm also there were significant reporting of tactical voting, last-minute tactical voting from the ground level, where a big number of seats, there are reports that Akalis got their votes turned for BJP candidates, and big number of seats where BJP got their vote turned for Akali candidates as well. So that is something which is a real political scenario. It happened last time, and it can never get reflected in any polling number, any exit poll or any such process, simply because when such changes, last-minute swings, last-minute tactical shifts happen, people do not really talk about it on record. People do not come and interview you and tell you, Jyoti, yesterday I was going to vote for the BJP, and today my leader came in and said that, drop the BJP candidate and vote for the Akali candidate, and this is why I'm shifting. Nobody tells you. Right. Nobody comes and accept that there have been a tactical voting. So yesterday, my researchers, my people in the field, they did tell me that there is a very significant tactical voting that is going around. BJP people, where they feel they are out of the race, they are shifting their vote to Akalis, and Akali also where they feel they are out of the way. And let's remember always that they were in alliance for almost 3 decades, and they know the local level synchronization way better. So if I have to just read these qualitative scenarios, I don't know about quantitative at this point of time. And what is puzzling me, and what I will again find real difficult hard time for me while analyzing the data with my team, is that 5 years back, hum is मामले में गच्चा खा गए थे, because we went by the data and we said Aam Aadmi Party is sweeping, and Aam Aadmi Party became a principal opposition, but they could not get the groundswell converted into vote, and those votes into the seats, because of the tactical swing of Hindus towards the Congress. And if it is happening again, it's not making me happy. I'm telling you, I am again kind of getting a feeling of deja vu kind of thing, that something can go wrong. So I have to be double sure about it. But Malwa, if it is a high turnout, then Malwa might very well go one-way for traffic for the Aam Aadmi Party.
So see, Rahul, Yashwant is already hedging his bets. He has been saying Aam Aadmi Party is going to do well, but now you see in this discussion, he's already saying, "Acha, pichli time ki tarah ab is dafa bhi kuch bhi ho sakta hai." Now, what I found very interesting was that, when Guru Ravidas Jayanti was being celebrated, right? And they had to postpone the election from the 14th to the 20th, because the Election Commission and the major political parties didn't even think that thousands and thousands of voters would travel to Banaras to pay their obeisance to Guru Ravidas. So this Dalit vote, which is so important, and as all of you are saying, nobody really talks about. Tell me a little bit more about it. And I want to talk about the AAP challenge.
Okay. Thank you, Jyoti. This question should have been actually posed to Professor Jotka, who has written.
We will talk about it.
Yeah, but so Dalits, as you know, in Punjab basically has the highest number of Dalits across India, right? Around 30-31%. And basically, making Channi the chief minister. So there were 2 mistakes which Congress did. One is, of course, removing Amrinder was a fine move given the kind of anti-incumbency sentiment he had accumulated. But the manner in which Congress party went about first removing Amrinder and then basically making everyone unhappy, not even putting its entire weight behind Channi, is basically, in a way, Congress got more factionalized than it was. If your most important Hindu leader in the state, and Hindus, as Professor Jotka pointed out, is an important constituency, 35 to 40% of the state, right? He says that I was denied the position because I'm a Hindu. And your General Secretary, Ambika Soni, saying something like that, how can we have a Hindu as a chief minister, basically stirred the pot. So that's one mistake Congress made in terms of doing that choices. Second, there is no homogeneous Dalit vote in Punjab, as in any part of the country, right? Dalits are as fragmented as any large caste in any part of this country is. So just when we think about a Dalit vote, it's not Dalit vote. If you look at the numbers, even within the Sikh Dalit vote slightly differently compared to Hindu Dalits. And then within Hindu Dalits and Sikh Dalits, there are going to be small jatis and regional effects. Some are associated with Deras making some influential role in certain districts of Punjab. So to talk about Dalit vote would be a misnomer. The third point is, if the Congress is banking solely on Channi being able to mobilize more Dalits, I think they are again a mistake. The reason is that Congress in some ways by 2070s had got a larger segment of Dalit vote. So the potential of making big gains is there less, and then basically antagonizing other groups has put Congress in a very tough spot. And if Yashwant, what he's saying qualitatively is right, and given the turnout differences, what we could actually see is a meltdown of Congress in Punjab. So a party which was basically winning the state comfortably 8 months or 10 months ago may end up being party number 3. And we know something about Congress, once it goes below 25-20% vote share mark, it never revives in that state. Never.
Okay. Professor Jotka, do you think there is a meltdown of the Congress in Punjab?
We don't know. I mean, an election result would tell us. Obviously, this is going to be realignment. And, caste works in very different ways. I don't think religious divisions between Hindu and Sikhs matter so much within the Dalit constituency. But yes, in case of Punjab, even though the demographic number is 32%, 31.87 or something, 32 is not exactly the Dalit number. So this is a scheduled caste number. There are communities who could be actually listed as ST. Punjab doesn't have ST list. And there was a large chunk of Raida Sikhs who were made part of the scheduled castes in 2006. And that's how number went up from 28 to 32%. So the ex-untouchable communities, they will make for around 25% of the state population, which is very large. And I personally feel that there is a possibility of official category of scheduled caste acquiring a life of its own, because the enthusiasm that people expressed at the time when Channi was made chief minister, it was not confined to his own community of Ramdasiyas. It was all across. But again, it depends on, I think, the point that has already been made by both the other kind of speakers is alienation of Jat Sikh votes.
Yeah,
if Jat Sikh vote gets alienated from Congress. But again, we don't really know who is the constituency of Congress. Right? Congress has also lost its cadre. It doesn't really work consistently at the local level. It kind of mobilizes some leaders, and they then have their own contacts. So in that sense, Congress does not have cadre in Punjab. It has leaders at various levels in villages also, and they can always switch sides, as we have seen in Indian democracy. Everyone is going the way grass is green. So it's going to be complicated for Congress. It might turn out a winner, and if that happens, then it will have to rework its own social base and constituency and identity. But that is a big challenge for Congress party.
So let's talk about the Aam Aadmi Party a bit. All of you have said that it is a key challenge this time. Professor Jyotka, I just want to hear your first comments on the Aam Aadmi Party, and how do you think they could do better this time, and why than the last time around?
Well, people are obviously looking for change. The obvious thing that everyone seemed to suggest was that we have seen both Congress as well as the Akalis. This time we want change. So the point is that this farmers movement and this particular last 10 years, they have broken the hegemony of Jat Sikh, the big landed Sikh, because agriculture itself has become marginalized in Punjab. Everyday life, and agriculture employs not more than 25 to 30% people directly. A class of landless laborers has virtually melted out. So there are not many people who are dependent on agriculture indirectly. Even those who are farmers, big farmers, they are living in cities and they cultivate their lands, and they have migrant laborers from Bihar who are actually working there as attached laborers. So the actual social ground of Punjab has shifted quite significantly. And it is in this context, if, for example, AAP is seen as an urban party. So in Punjab, AAP has actually more traction in rural areas than it has in urban areas. And Malwa is much more rural and much more agrarian than Majha and Doaba. Doaba is very urban. Doaba is like, everything is urban. There's hardly any village in Doaba in classical sense of the term. But yes, I mean, this is kind of going to be a very interesting moment for Punjab, and AAP definitely had traction. There was all kind of surveys. Besides surveys, people were kind of openly saying that इस बार झाड़ू लगाएंगे जी, झाड़ू लगाएंगे, दोनों को देख लिया, अभी हमें परिवर्तन चाहिए. But again, the weaknesses of AAP is obviously apart from cadre. At the local level, many people were saying that the kind of candidates they selected, they were not really the most deserving ones, and there were all kinds of allegations which were being made that these are people who have money and that's why they have been given tickets and those kinds of things. So again, these could be a political kind of counter complaints about the other party. We don't really know on ground whether people are connecting with. The main important problem with AAP, which is likely to become a problem, is the question of insider-outsider. Because AAP went to Punjab with Kejriwal's face. Now, Kejriwal is a Delhi person. Now, it initially worked as positive thing that we have a new face coming in. But later on terms of, Punjab is also a very kind of regionalist collective mind. Delhi is not something that they actually look positively towards. So somebody who is representing Delhi Sarkar or Delhi Darbar or anyway outside of Delhi. So regionalism is very strong in Punjab. So his face, which is there on every poster of AAP, might actually, that's what Channi was trying to invoke towards the end of the elections. That might actually turn against him among at least a section of voters who could have voted for. And that's why declaring CM candidate is actually good for AAP, but that we don't know what dynamics will work out. I think Yashwant would have kind of, better things to say. Yeah.
So 2 questions to you, Yashwant. The first is that, when the Prime Minister wears a turban and tries to sort of identify himself as a Punjabi, and remember during the emergency, he spent a long time in Punjab underground. So how does the voter respond to that? And we saw that, 1 or 2 days before the poll, he met these Afghan Sikhs in Delhi, of course, but maybe that was a message to Punjab. So that's the first question. And the second is about how the farm laws, first the implementation, or they tried to implement the farm laws, then it was repealed 1 year later. Has that affected the chances of the Samyukt Samaj Party? Are they going to be anywhere in this poll?
We'll answer your second question first because that's an easy one, actually. I think if the Kisan parties were to make any impact, they should have started the campaign and put in the candidates in a proper way. They came in at a very last moment. And by that time, whatever the goodwill of the farmers were there, that was already politically oriented. So they might poll some percentage of votes. I am not denying that they will not vote some votes, but I am finding it hard to believe that they will be electorally significant to make them win anything on the ground. So first things first. And will they vote 1% or 5%? That is something which we cannot know as such. Even the exit polling data will be difficult because the first time parties, there is no electoral base to run your algorithms on and to understand where exactly these votes came from. So sometimes the first time parties are always a puzzle. Now I will come down to the first question that you asked about Prime Minister Modi. I think Punjab is an unsolved puzzle, unsolved mystery for Prime Minister Modi. Because for the 7 years in our tracker, Jyoti, there are consistently three states who have been giving anti-Modi, anti-BJP rating. First was Tamil Nadu, second was Kerala, and third was Punjab. Consistently, these three states, have been giving anti-Modi, anti-PM, anti-BJP, anti-NDA, anti-central government, consistent rating. Now, out of these three, two are understandable. Kerala is obviously the weakest of the link for the BJP as far as BJP electoral prospects are concerned. Tamil Nadu, as long as they were in with AIA, DMK, it was fine. But we know that 2014 elections, when it counted the more, BJP contested separately. Even after Amma and Modi had a very good understanding, and if Modi would have fallen short of few seats, Amma would have been more than happy to provide those numbers. And she swept Tamil Nadu in 2014. So I think two things happened in Tamil Nadu. We'll leave it aside what happened after Amma's death. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Where Punjab is puzzling is that even with a strong ally and everything, why Punjab went anti-Modi, that probably has a lot to do with the 5 years misgovernance by the Akalis when Modi was in picture as a prime minister as well. Please remember that Akalis were kicked out of power in 2017 only, and those were that 5 year was actually as a 5+5 because they won the 2012 as an incumbent. So there was a double incumbency, extremely unpopular Akali government, and BJP was nowhere to be seen in the picture. And BJP cadres were restless, BJP people were restless, and it was a kind of a sense of helplessness that we have won Delhi, our guy is in Delhi as a prime minister, and we are unable to do anything in Punjab. So I believe that Punjab had a lot to do with the unpopularity of the Badals and the Akalis, which came down as a collateral damage for the BJP. Rather than Punjabis judging Modi individually or judging BJP, something like that. And why? And the farm laws didn't make it easier. Farm laws, again, put the significant majority of the Punjab on the street against Prime Minister Modi individually. Okay. So instead of helping and solving that thing, it went from bad to worse. But As far as Modi and everybody knows Modi, I think he doesn't like unsolved mysteries. I mean, if he is on something, he likes to take those fights, those things to the logical end. So Punjab, something tells me, will be on his agenda. The kind of ziddi person that he is, it will remain on his agenda to वो कुलबुलाता रहेगा कीड़ा कि मुझे पंजाब में मैं पॉपुलर क्यों नहीं. He can give excuse for himself in Kerala and give excuse for himself in Tamil Nadu, but Punjab वो दिमाग में कीड़ा कुलबुलाता रहेगा बंदे के. So he will come around it, and I know for sure that Punjab, we always figured out during the farm laws protest, Rahul, please correct me here, that we thought that as if entire Punjab is against farm laws and like that, and they were sitting on the parade, which was not the case. There was a significant number of minorities, and particularly the Hindus, who were really pickled up with the possibility of Khalistani angle in those protests, and they were really fearing going back to the 80s. That fear of going back to the 80s was pretty much there among the Hindus in Punjab. Last time, 5 years back, when the Khalistani angle came in for Aam Aadmi Party, they reacted to it and they voted for the Congress just to stop the Aam Aadmi Party.
Right.
This time, Aam Aadmi Party actually started gaining a traction in the urban Punjab. As Professor Saab said, that they are a party of rural Punjab in typical sense. But this time, they were gaining a traction. So Arvind Kejriwal actually did succeed in getting those 5 years back, that kind of branding washed away a little bit in that way. And that could have yielded something for them in Majha, if not Doaba, at least in Majha. So that all hangs in balance right now. But this low turnout is a googly.
So Rahul, your take on the farm laws in Punjab, why do you think that the Kisan parties may not do as well as they thought at least that they could have done?
Okay, I'll basically make 3 points. One on the Kisan parties, 2 on Modi, and 3 on the AAP. First, on Kisan parties, the logic of social movements is always very different from logic of electoral politics. Even the largest movements mobilized, say, 5 lakh people. But in even one small parliamentary constituency will have 10 to 15 lakh voters. So just the scale at which electoral politics operates and the scale at which movements operate are very different. And as Yashwant pointed out, they are too late in the game. There wasn't a consensus among all Kisan unions whether they should go for politics or not, which all seats they should contest. So it's basically the planning for movement and planning for electoral politics is very different. They are going to move some votes here and there, may change the outcome in closely contested constituencies, but they themselves won't emerge as a big player this time. Second, on Modi, and I completely agree with Yashwant on that, like he's not going to let Punjab go out of his head. Prime Minister is master of symbolism. You like him or you don't like him, he will use every possible moment and every possible symbol to do politics. Politics in a different sense, like bad politics, good politics, that for normative judgment, but every moment will be politicized. So Prime Minister going and his car being stopped at, the bridge is not basically will be left out. It's a moment of politics and it will be politicized. So in a way, yes, he had the burden of Akali Dal. And I remember asking a couple of friends who are in BJP that given the corruption charges, and you have already, they contested 2014 Vidhan Sabha election in Maharashtra without Shiv Sena. So I said, why, you're not doing the same thing in Punjab? Leave Akalis and try on your own. You are on a momentum. And their argument was that, if we leave Akalis today, then we will be charged with that these guys don't care about religious minorities. We are already down on the Muslim question. So we want to basically it's a border state and all those logics. I don't know whether that logic was operating at the top. But the third one is, so the reason AAP is gaining more traction this time compared to the last is basically 2 things. One, in 5 years, they must have figured out certain things where they went wrong. Okay. Second, because Captain Amrinder Singh got that 5-year chance. So now, or Congress got that chance. And then in last 6 months, they basically made a mess out of this transition, right? So now they were already unhappy with the Akalis for 10 years, and they are now unhappy with Congress because their own house is not in order. So the natural tendency is then to look towards the third alternative. And that's why there is a greater perceptive wave for Badlao. Whether that will convert or not, we'll get to know that on March 10th.
Okay, Professor Jyotkar, I'm going to ask you to tie up all these threads, but actually one of the most interesting issues that has come up is Prime Minister Modi's popularity or lack of it in Punjab. What is your take on that?
I personally feel they are not willing to understand Punjab. I think Punjab is obviously different from the rest of the country. For example, when Modi went, and what he needed to do was to, Punjabis like embracing, right? They don't like being suspected. I think this went down very badly when he said that, tell your chief minister that I have reached safely. This, nobody liked it. I don't think it is just the dominant Sikhs didn't like it. All across communities, all across castes, people felt offended that why is he passing a kind of judgment on us? And if there are no people in Israeli, that is not why we hate him. We don't hate him. Farmers said that if somebody had come and told us that Prime Minister is coming, we would have given him way. We would not have stopped him. So this was something that, you need to understand regional pulse. There are divisions of caste and community and Hindu and Sikh, that is there. But there is also a regional sense in which Punjab, for example, question of Pakistan would never sell in with Punjabis. When you say that you need to fight against Pakistan, Punjabis don't want to fight with Pakistan. They want the borders to be open. And this is irreconcilable. It's not something which is politically mobilized. It's more cultural. It's kind of also economic at some level. They feel that if this place becomes open, for example, when Kartarpur corridor was opened, not even one person came out publicly said that it would open up ways for Pakistan to interfere and spoil. So there are certain very basic things about Punjabi psyche which the Prime Minister does not want to understand. I don't think he can't understand. So there are various other problems as well, which perhaps, yes, not just Prime Minister, the RSS is also very keen to have Sikhs on their side. They don't think Sikhs are minority, nor do Sikhs see themselves as minority. So I think, again, this whole question of language of minority also works against, does not work in Punjab.
Can I just ask you, Professor, you talked about Kartarpur Sahib. In fact, I think it was Rajnath Singh, or I think maybe the Prime Minister himself, who said that when partition happened, it was the Congress party that made a mistake. Nahi to Kartarpur Sahib India ke andar hota. And the other thing is Captain Amrinder Singh keeps saying कि वो सिद्धू तो वो बाजवा मतलब Pakistan Army Chief बाजवा का बंदा है. So the anger that Captain Amrinder Singh, who has fought in the wars against Pakistan, the anger that he displays about Pakistan. So you think that is a factor or that is not a factor? And how do
that works? Yeah, so that worked in favor of Sidhu. So it's not only Kartarpur Gurudwara that Sikhs want. They also want to go to Nankana. They also want to go to Lahore. Lahore is so much there in blood of Punjabis. Lahore nahi dekhe aur jamya hi nahi. Right? They want to go to that bazaar in Lahore, the famous bazaar. What is that? Kalim Bazaar, and they want to do shopping there. So there is a general sentiment that this is our Punjab, a larger Punjab, Punjabi identity. See, memories have their own sociology and politics, and you can't kind of this away. And Punjabi Hindus, most of the Punjabi Hindus have a very direct, open, still memorial connection, and their third generation also, which has nothing to do with their actual house in Rawalpindi or Lahore or Faisalabad, but they also want to go there. They also want to kind of connect with that. So there is something else about Punjab, which I think the national mainstream does not want to talk about because you're so invested in producing Pakistan as your enemy, right? So, and that's where I think Modi also has his limitations. RSS has his limitations, even though the Sikhs have nothing against them. As I said, Sikhs don't have this minority kind of mindset. They feel very comfortable with everyone. They will have no problem with Modi coming and sitting with them in Golden Temple. They'll also give him Siropa, but he has to come as a sevak, as a person who is just come to take umatha. It's not like as Prime Minister. So there you have to be humble. You have to be like any other kind of devotee, not as somebody who comes with chappan inch ki chati. That's another symbolism which doesn't work in Punjab. Punjab is at one level there is Sardari, but also there is culture of humility. That in Gurudwara, in front of certain situation, you have to be completely humble and non-significant. There's a whole Sufi kind of tradition. So all those things come together, which at some level the kind of politics that RSS does, they are incapable of understanding because it doesn't work along with their theorization of subcontinental cultures. So I think Punjab is a kind of, it's hard to understand because they also don't want to understand.
Right. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. But this culture of humility that Professor Jyotka, you talked about, I mean, I remember after the Blue Star operation and after Mrs. Indira Gandhi's assassination, when Surjit Singh Barnala had to do Kar Seva at the Golden Temple and he was poised to polish shoes and they were declared Tankhaiya and all these things that happened. But Prime Minister Modi's whole adoption of the turban in Punjab and what that means for the for not just for this election, but in the times to come. But thank you all so much, Professor Surinder Jyotka of JNU, Yashwant Deshmukh of C Voter, and Rahul Verma of the Center for Policy Research. Thank you so much for joining me in the print debates.
Thank you, everyone.